Hey everyone! The conversation over Malcolm Jamal Warner's heartbreaking death has officially been joined by Miss Jaguar Wright. And if even half of what she's alleging is accurate, this might be a cover-up as well as a tragedy. Jaguar claims that Malcolm wasn't simply in a downward spiral prior to his death. He was literally rushing away from someone or something. And now, following weeks of rumors, U.S. officials are finally taking action. According to reports, the police have started a formal examination of the events leading up to Malcolm's last days, and, everything Jaguar forewarned us about is beginning to match what they're finding, what was causing Malcolm's paranoia, and what frightened him. And just how profound is this? Because this wasn't a random occurrence. If Jaguar Wright is right, it wasn't an abrupt change. This served as a warning. All of us missed it. Let's begin now. According to Jaguar Wright, Malcolm Jamal Warner did not simply take a vacation to Costa Rica, as the media would have us believe. She claimed that Malcolm Jamal Warner was on the run and not on vacation. According to her, he was truly terrified that something terrible was about to happen since he knew someone was after him. It was at this point that everything became really suspicious. This eerie footage shows Malcolm going by himself on a pitch-black beach just hours before he passed away. It appeared normal at first, however. If you look closely, he doesn't appear at ease. It appears strange. His energy was stiff, as if he was keeping an eye on his back. And he appeared to be carrying a big burden. People are now claiming that it seemed as though he was aware of information that we were not. We have now received an update regarding Malcolm Jamal Warner's drowning death. Malcolm Jamal Warner reportedly drowned while on vacation in Costa Rica, according to ABC7. The post continues by stating that Warner perished on Sunday off the coast of Costa Rica. In fact, this happened on Sunday. They said that ABC News had been informed of this by the Costa Rica National Police. The question now is, from whom was he fleeing? And why hasn't the news been covering this extensively? Because this wasn't just a terrible accident if Jaguar is speaking the truth. And let's face it, she's been correct before. Behind the scenes, something was happening. Additionally, Malcolm may have been attempting to communicate with us before it was too late. However, Jaguar claims that Malcolm appeared so frightened in that video because he had supposedly recently received another threat. This time from some very influential individuals he intended to expose. According to her, that beach moment wasn't just any old late-night stroll. It happened immediately after he received yet another warning. He appeared to be struggling with something, which is why he appeared so tense. This is when things get wild. People were already asking questions when the video was initially released. It was simply uncomfortable. He didn't appear to be there. In an attempt to explain why he appeared so strange, some people even began to speculate that he might be under the influence of narcotics or some other substance. However, this is when things take a drastic turn. When the autopsy results were released, they revealed that Malcolm had no drugs in his system. Thus, all of the conjectures regarding him potentially being they were mistaken. You are forced to view the beach footage with new eyes once you remove that from the equation. Because what was causing Malcolm to appear so nervous if he was totally sober? Jaguar Wright's allegations now strike much more forcefully. And that video wasn't random. If he was truly being threatened by influential individuals and he was aware that he was in danger, it might have been the realization that things had become so serious. And to be honest, that makes a difference. Additionally, Jaguar claims that the account of his drowning doesn't really fit because, reportedly, that's not how it happened. Jaguar claims that Malcolm was already gone before he even reached the ocean, which may account for the fact that he made no attempt to resist the current or flee the riptide. His body was discovered in the water. Fans are now seriously doubting the official story because of that portion. Since let's not remember, Malcolm was a good swimmer. He was well versed in dealing with a riptide. And it wasn't just any old tourist who lost their mind in the sea. Perhaps he couldn't fight it, which is why he didn't, or worse, perhaps he was never given the opportunity. Then, from whom was Malcolm fleeing? For what reason were they pursuing him? Additionally, the actual how did they convince the audience to think nothing happened? That is the question. Jaguar claims that Malcolm was singled out as soon as he quit playing the game. She asserts that he refused to compromise himself in order to appease Hollywood. And that's when things may get risky if you know anything about the way this industry operates. Jaguar claims that Malcolm was unwilling to be the submissive, calm, and secure version of a black guy that Hollywood prefers to maintain. He spoke out. He criticized hypocrisy. Additionally, it seems that he had plans to reveal some information that might have raised alarms. And if you've been listening, you're well aware that Hollywood has long been accused of attempting to feminize or muzzle black men who are outspoken. And the true problem arises when kids cease to cooperate, or, worse, begin to speak up. You all recall what transpired with Dave Chappelle in 2005, don't you? The media went into a frenzy when he allegedly walked away from that $50 million Comedy Central deal, dipped, and traveled out to Africa. Tabloids was portraying him as unstable and spreading crazy rumors that he was suffering from a mental illness or was under the influence of narcotics. However, Dave clarified everything when he returned and sat down with Oprah. It wasn't about the money, he said. It has to do with the conditions that came with it, the way they attempted to confine him, the pressure and the control. He stated unequivocally that he would not sell out and allow the industry to mold him into someone he wasn't.
Why'd you walk away from $50 million?
Well, I wasn't walking away from the money.
Yeah.
I was walking away from the circumstances that were coming with the newfound plateau.
Yeah.
It takes a while when you punch through
Dave claimed that he rejected that Comedy Central offer mostly because he began to see a pattern that didn't sit well with him. He discusses how performers experience a gloomy period just before they go to the next level of celebrity. Additionally, he made it apparent that the same system that gives you support will destroy you as soon as you stop complying. Therefore, he did not allow them to reshape him. He favored peace over authority.
Business since I was 14, and I've heard the stories of what happens, and I've seen these kinds of things play out in front of me.
Okay. When you say you heard the stories, what do you mean? What stories?
I mean, you see it before. Look, Mariah Carey made a $100 million deal, and 3 months later, she's all of a sudden mysteriously crazy. Or Martin Lawrence punches through and he's waving a gun on the street screaming, "They're trying to kill me."
Yeah, we hear those stories.
And it always happens around the time in their career where it seems as though they're crossing over the next plateau.
Didn't mince words when Oprah pressed him to explain what specifically caused him to leave. He claimed that as if they were laughing at him rather than with him. He was being pressured to produce drawings that seemed socially irresponsible. However, it was more than that. The jokes weren't innocuous. He sensed that the intention was to have people laugh at black males rather than alongside them, and he was unable to ignore it after realizing that. Dave, however, claimed that it seemed as though he was being used to degrade his own people just to make a joke, and that was the tipping point for him. And when we apply that to Malcolm's case, the similarities begin to seem all too true.
Sounds like somebody's trying to put young Dave in a compromising position.
Dave almost lost everything because he raised his voice for years following that. His career was essentially on life support. Nevertheless, he persevered and returned. However, Jaguar claims that Malcolm wasn't as fortunate because he was following the same course. However, he was pointing out some extremely hazardous material. Consider the Kendrick and Drake relationship. Malcolm took a step back and called it what it was, while the entire hip-hop community was picking sides. He refrained from adding to the drama. Rather, he highlighted the presence of influential individuals behind the scenes, attempting to discredit two of the game's most significant black men, according to Jack. Malcolm wasn't merely stirring up controversy. Rather, he was revealing something that the public didn't want to see, which is why those individuals didn't like that at all. To pose a serious threat, however, according to the fact that Malcolm wasn't holding back in his final podcast interviews, gave Jaguar the impression that everything was even more suspicious. He publicly criticized the influential individuals working behind the scenes, accusing them of using black males as props and pulling strings for their personal benefit. Malcolm broke down in one of those videos, are continuously deprived of their humanity by the media. He discussed how, simply by existing, individuals are confined, stigmatized, and pushed to the limit. However, his implication that he was going to reveal everything was what really took them by surprise. No ambiguous manifest, like a man, he was speaking urgently, who knew that time was running out. In retrospect, Many people are questioning whether that was his warning, if he was aware that this time was almost up and that he had angered the wrong people. What he said was this:
Black community is not a monolith. There's so many levels and lanes to the Black community, and we wanted to have a space where we could acknowledge, discuss all of those lanes, because they're so varied in terms of our perspectives and our opinions and our ways of life, and we wanted to be able to have a place where we can talk about all of those things, discuss all of those things, and shed light on the not all hood aspects of
Even though Jaguar's assertions seem outrageous, many fans are beginning to feel the same way, because there is just too much that doesn't add up when you actually sit down and consider everything. The timeline is disorganized. The details continue to change. And what should have been a simple case begins to unravel the instant you spend more than 5 seconds looking at it. Officials first stated, for instance, that Malcolm was dragged into the riptide while attempting to save his daughter. It seems that Mr. Warner was playing with his daughter at the shoreline at one point, a judicial investigation agency official stated. Later, he stepped away from her in the water and is said to have gone into the sea with a companion. The river drew them in at that precise moment. Warner, regrettably, did not escape. But the friend did, however. That account of events quickly raised concerns. The head of the Atlantic Region's tourism police gave a totally different account. He asserted that when the drowning occurred, Malcolm's family, including his daughter, wasn't even at the beach. He claims that although they conducted interviews with Malcolm's family, they were not present when the accident occurred. We now have two contradictory accounts from official sources, and it's difficult to determine which is true. That court probe is even more bizarre. And to assist, using his board to volunteer and save Warner's daughter, Burr and another surfer were dragged to shore by a lifeguard. Every single person who says they were there seems to have a different account of what transpired. The question of who is speaking the truth, or if anyone is speaking the truth at all, must eventually come up. Jaguar Wright claims that even the US government isn't entirely accepting the official narrative, and they are supposedly starting their own inquiry into Malcolm's death back. Also of this, remember that Malcolm was still a US citizen, even if this is all taking place outside of the US and is technically beyond their jurisdiction. You already know that people don't want to play with Uncle Sam if there is even a whip for foul play. Furthermore, the US government would not be the first to intervene after a mysterious death abroad. Do you all recall Shanquella Robinson's tragic situation from 2022? She tragically died in Cabo, Mexico, while traveling, and because the situation was simply too shady to overlook, the US intervened and carried out a separate investigation, even though the Mexican authorities had already started their own. Malcolm's situation may be receiving far more attention behind the scenes than we've been told, if history is any indication, and Jaguar claims that's just what's going to occur. According to her, the federal government is already investigating Malcolm's true circumstances, and Hollywood may be in for a major upheaval if that turns out to be the case, because the entire business might have to answer for a lot of stuff they've been ignoring if investigators link this to the individuals who were supposedly threatening him, and it turns out that his death wasn't just some terrible accident. This could be more significant than anyone anticipated if Jaguar is correct, and the federal government is actually intervening. Malcolm Jamal Warner wasn't merely attempting to avoid attention. He may have been attempting to survive. We're no longer just discussing a tragic death, though. Since the US government is apparently starting its own probe, we're talking about secrets coming to light, powerful people potentially being exposed, and a story that might cause major shockwaves in Hollywood. For if the truth truly perceives, the whoever has been hidden in the dark is out of the game when daylight arrives.